إننا نوينا التعلم والتعليم والتذكير والنفع والانتفاع والإفادة والاستفادة والدعاء إلى الهدى والدلالة على الخير والحث والتمسك بكتاب الله وسنة رسول الله ابتغاء مرضات الله وقربه وثوابه سبحانه وتعالى. الحمد لله رب العالمين حمدا يوافي نعمه ويكافئ مزيدا والصلاة والسلام على خير الأنام وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. So we praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a master, a controller, a creator that's worthy of all magnificence and glory. And we praise and we gratify Him, most high and exalted. And we ask our Lord to send copious and unlimited and eternal blessings and salutations upon our beloved Prophet, the guide to all of humankind, and the guide to the jinns also. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us of those people that are included in those salat wa taslim, in those salutations from our Lord most high. And mabad. So inshallah, most important thing, we clarify and we clear and we renew our intentions inshallah, that we're seeking knowledge inshallah ta'ala to be close to Allah, to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the first instance, and also to be close to and know and emulate the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and then for our personal benefit in this world and the next, and so that we can practice that knowledge inshallah, and that we can also propagate what we know and what we comprehend, particularly considering that this chapter is about that propagation. So where did we get up to then? If we read that chapter or that paragraph, did we finish the whole paragraph? I don't think so. I don't think we did. وقد وصف الله المؤمن قال المؤلف رحمه الله رضي الله عنه وعنكم ونفعنا به وبكم وقد وصف الله المؤمنين في غير موضع في كتابه بالأمر بالمعروف والنهي عن المنكر وقد وصفهم به في بعض المواضع على الإيمان وفي بعضها على إقامة الصلاة وإيتاء الزكاة.
In many contexts has God attributed enjoining good and forbidding evil to the believers, on some occasions even before attributing faith to them, and on others before mentioning the regular performance of praise and the giving of zakah.
That's it. I didn't read that like the English comes across. It says, وَصَفَ اللَّهُ سُبْحَانَهُ وَتَعَالَى وَقَدَّمَ وَصْفَهُمْ بِهِ. Like when he
initiated.
It doesn't necessarily mean that that it's before those things. That's not what it necessarily means. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentions that that's one of the qualities of the believers. It doesn't necessarily mean that it can't come before those things, right? Because those things are the foundation of our deen. So it can't come before Iman. Okay, it says وَقَدَّمَ وَصْفَهُمْ بِهِ. In other words, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala preceded the description of the mu'mineen in that sense with the quality of being those who enjoy good and dissuade evil before He mentioned Iman. It doesn't necessarily mean that this comes before Iman. It can't come before Iman. That's impossible. Nor can it come before Iqamat Salat, the establishment of prayer, or the giving of zakat. So that's not what the Imam is saying, that these things comes. It's not what he's saying, that Amr Ma'ruf wa Nahy al Munkar comes before doing those things. That's not what it means. What he's trying to say is the importance or the significance of calling to Allah in that sense. Rather than saying calling to Allah, we're just going to use that phrase inshallah. The significance of it is such that that's how important it is, a quality for the believers to have. That it comes before as a quality, not as a faridah, not as a rukn of the deen. So it's good that we looked at that point. And it's a wasf, it's a description. It's not a hukm in that sense. It's not a ruling of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants or doesn't want. That's clear. But it's a wasf because anyone who has anything good, maybe not anyone who has a aql salim, anyone whose disposition is sound and whose intellect is sound, of course they're going to want good for others. It's pretty much accepted that as human beings we're communal by nature. We live in communities. We live in societies. And so creatures, animals, whatever you want to call them, that live in society, they don't only work for their own betterment, personally and individually. They work for the betterment of that society. If they're, like ants and bees and all these other insects, and even even bears, be they as they may, and angry as they might be, and grumpy as they might seem, they still have there's a hierarchy. There's still a hierarchy about who does what and who can do what. So human beings, and not comparing human beings to creatures, we're just saying that that's communal, anything that lives together, even sharks actually, which are quite loners. One time I watched this documentary on great white sharks. There was a carcass of a whale, and they all, who was going to eat first. It was very, very orderly. It wasn't like you'd imagine sharks being when there's a massive carcass of a whale. They kind of all sized each other up, and the biggest was this big female, and she ate first. And when she finished, everyone had their turn. So there's order in terms of what goes on in societies, generally speaking, and part of that order is that to look out for everyone else, to look out for those others that are maybe disenfranchised, to look out for those that are elderly or weak or whatever the case might be. And part of that is wishing good for those people, and part of it also is not wanting evil or negativity or detriment to come to those individuals. So that's what I believe the reference of Imam Haddad is saying is in that regard. And then he says, وَقَالَ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى لُعِنَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا مِنْ بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ عَلَى لِسَانِ دَاوُودَ وَعِيسَى ابْنَ مَرْيَمَ ذَلِكَ بِمَا عَصُوا وَكَانُوا يَعْتَدُونَ كَانُوا لَا يَتَنَاهَوْنَ عَنْ مُنْكَرٍ فَعَلُوا لَبِئْسَ مَا كَانُوا يَفْعَلُونَ وَقَالَ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى وَاتَّقُوا فِتْنَةً لَا تَصِيبَنَّ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا مِنْكُمْ خَاصَّةً.
He has said, exalted is he, those are the He has said, exalted is he, those are the children of Israel who disbelieved were cursed by the tongue of David and Jesus, son of Mary, because they rebelled and used to transgress. They restrained not one another from wickedness they did. Indeed, evil was what they used to do. And guard yourselves against a chastisement which cannot fall exclusively on those of you who do wrong.
Right, so these two verses, the first one's from Surah Al-Ma'idah, the second one from Surah Al-Anfal, they're specific to the result of a people not enjoining good, or according to Allah in that sense, not enjoining good and not dissuading evil. So the first example is Bani Israel, the children of Yaqub alayhi salam. His name is Israel, that's kind of his laqab or nickname. Okay? Ala lisani Dawood. So why would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say upon the tongue of Dawood alayhi salam? What's so significant about Dawood with regards to upon the speech of Sayyidina Dawood?
The king, and it's also had the most beautiful voice.
Alright, that's true. It's because he had a book. He had the Zabur. So the lisan, Dawood's not saying it, Allah's saying it on the tongue, so to speak, through the speech of Sayyidina Dawood, who's relating what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says. Because the la'na, prophets don't do that. There's some examples, but that's not their way. Their way is rahmah, their way is inclusiveness, their way is to bring people together and guide them how to live properly in this life and how to return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the next life. Okay? Wa Isa ibn Maryam. Why is Isa mentioned? Its clue's already been given away. Right? What is it? What is it? Why?
He brought the song.
Right? He brought the Bible. Okay? The Injil. So, he came with the Injil, which again is the word of Allah, and came out on the tongue of Sayyidina Isa ibn Maryam, to know that it's not from Allah, that Isa isn't Allah, or isn't God, but he's Ibn Maryam, the son of Maryam. Bima asu wa kanu ya'tadun. Okay? Through the things that they transgressed, they were disobedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they transgressed, and they وَكَانُوا لَا يَتَنَاهَوْنَ عَنْ مُنْكَرٍ. So, فَعَلُوا. So what happened was, that they knew what they were doing. They were cheating people. They were spreading corruption and evil throughout the land. And what basically that means is they were confusing people. They were confusing people. Just recently I saw a post from one of the learned people, and he's like, oh, what a time we live in. We're confused. You know, we read or see something one moment and we believe it, and we read and see something the next moment, and it changes our mind completely. Habib, why are you confused? I got shocked when I saw it from a person of knowledge. Why are you confused for? You got the book of Allah. You got the sunnah of the Prophet of Allah. There's no reason to be confused. If a person with knowledge is confused, their knowledge isn't benefiting them. Their knowledge is so that you're not confused. You have 100% certainty, 100% yaqeen. As we said, your iman does not waver. Your iman is the iman of walking on water. Your iman is the iman of not being burnt by fire. Your iman is the iman that animals and wild beasts will not hurt you by the amr of Allah. And don't think I'm dreaming or talking about saying it's not real. The hadith of the Prophet of Allah talking about the end of time, when how will the people live in the time of the Antichrist? What are they what's their sustenance going to be? Right. The remembrance of Allah. So what's that going to come with? Oh yeah, drive to the drive-in and get remembrance of Allah to go? Is that what it is? Or you're going to supersize the remembrance of Allah? It doesn't work that way. You can't order it on the internet and they'll deliver it to your house and that's it. You can't grow it in the garden. You can't catch it in the ocean. That's not how it works for the dhikr of Allah. It's with the conviction on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. With that conviction that they have and their remembrance of Allah, Allah will sustain their bodies. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't need the nutrients of the earth to sustain, doesn't need any of His creation subhanahu wa ta'ala to do anything. He can do it without those asbab. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses those asbab so we can see those things that are happening in order that we recognize and realize and nakhda'u, acquiesce to the greatness of Allah. We recognize the greatness of Allah. But when the time of the Antichrist comes, everything's going to be open. It's going to be open. So Allah will give those open karamat, those open graces that Allah want, that being one of them. That being one of them. And if we don't have that yaqeen and we're not fostering that yaqeen, we're not working towards that conviction, that imaniyat, what are we doing with our iman? Where's it going to get us? How's it going to save us? And so the confusion should not exist, especially when the Prophet's told us everything that's going to happen. He's told us everything. There's nothing that should be a surprise to the believer. I get surprised when I see people of knowledge getting surprised. Why are you surprised for? What means, unfortunately, the knowledge, and that's another thing that we'll talk a little bit about, that why are the people confused? It's because the people of so-called knowledge, whether their knowledge is lacking or which I don't like talking about, the evil scholars, but it's a reality. It's a reality. And the Prophet said, أَخْوَافُ مَا أَخَافُ عَلَيْكُمْ. The greatest of all the fears that I have about our ummah is these ulama su', these evil scholars, so-called. So that must be the case. I mean, that's what I'm saying. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Allah knows better. But why are we confused? Why is it? Because we don't know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that should not be the case. We should be working to that iman, that if Allah's decree is there, as long as I'm connected with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, walk on water, whatever, eat nothing, whatever the case might be. Whatever the case might be. Whatever the circumstance might be. If I'm truly with Allah, I can't be harmed but by the order of Allah. And nor can I be saved or given salvation but by the order of Allah. That's our belief. That's our iman. If we don't have that belief, whether it's manifested in real life or not, in other words, when it's manifested practically speaking or not, isn't the question. It's iman. That's our conviction. That's what we live by. And if that's not going on, then what is going on? Doubt. And what's doubt fostered by? The nafs and worked on by the shaitan. Doubt is his game. Confusion is his tactic. Misinformation is his technique. And why should we be in any doubt whatsoever, in my view, when the Prophet Musa ﷺ, what miracles was he sent with? Not specifically, but what were they about, those miracles? Magic. Sayyidina Isa ﷺ, what were his miracles about? Anyone know?
Wasn't it curing?
Right? Medicine and curing people. Sayyidina Rasulullah ﷺ, A'zam, the headstone of all his miracles was what? The Qur'an, which is what? What is it? And it's words. Why should we should we be surprised that the time in which we live in there are so many words? It's just words. Words over. Why are we worried about this word and that word and that word and this word when we've got the word of Allah that makes clear whether all the other words we hear and know are true or they're false? It makes it clear. And then the words of the Prophet of Allah, ﷺ, again, they interpret even the world in which we're living in. Why should we be confused? If we're confused, it's one of two things. Lack of iman, lack of knowledge. Or lack of application of knowledge to our iman, which is the third, but it's really a subset of the first two. So, they used to involve themselves in corruption. And that's what, in its essence, corruption is. Confusing the people. And they used to oppress people. They used to take their rights. They used to not give all these things. So what would happen? The scholars would come and say, oh, what are you guys doing? That's wrong. Don't do that. And then that evening they'll sit with them and have food. The next day they'll sit with them and drink. The third day they'll assemble with them. We talked about that previously. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. So in that situation, and that فعلوا لبئس ما كانوا يفعلون. That's the worst of actions that a person could do. There is no worse action in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than to know something is wrong. Than to know something is wrong. And to tell someone that's wrong, and that person doesn't desist from that wrong, and doesn't stop from that wrong, and then an individual keeps on associating with that person, keeps on eating, drinking, socializing if you like. Socializing with that individual. And then the next verse defines what will happen to those people that do that. He says, وَاتَّقُوا فِتْنَةً لَا تُصِيبَنَّ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا مِنْكُمْ خَاصَّةً. So the hadith in Muslim, so that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He doesn't punish the general people by the acts of the specific people that are committing those sins. The specific, in other words, the people that are partaking in indecent, lewd and immoral activities. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala won't punish everyone for the actions of the few. In other words, the few that are partaking. Except that indecency becomes manifest. Right? Everyone knows what's going on. Everyone. It becomes general knowledge throughout that society, throughout that community, that this immoral activity is going on. And they have the capacity, the majority of the people, the general populace, so to speak, has the capacity to stop those specific individuals from committing those immoral and indecent acts, unjust acts, If they don't do that, then that's when the punishment of the khassa becomes amma. The punishment of those partaking in the moral activities will cover all the people in that locality, in that community, in that society. So those two, the Imam put them there, Imam al-Haddad, he puts those two verses together so we can understand what the action is and what the result is in terms of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will do to a people like that. And then he says, وقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم من رأى منكم منكرا فليغيره بيده فإن لم يستطع فبلسانه فإن لم يستطع فبقلبه وذلك أضعف الإيمان.
The Messenger of God sallallahu alaihi wasallam, may blessings and peace be upon him, he said, any one of you who sees a reprehensible thing should change it with his hand. If he is unable to, then with his tongue. If he is unable to, then with his heart. Which thing is the weakest degree of faith? Right?
So we talked about this. This is the essence and one of the fundamental aspects of the performance of encouraging righteousness and dissuading reprehensible action or evil in that sense. It's a fundamental thing. We talked about that whoever has the opportunity, the capacity, the authority to change things physically, with violence, if some people call it today. It's not. It's by force. It's by force. And that's another one of those anomalies that we hear all the time. It's the people of power. The people, and today, what does that mean? It means nuclear weapons in reality. Right? And also, that's one aspect of it, but it's not the only aspect. And second, what? The word. The word. Don't forget the Qur'an is the word. It's the spoken word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The kalam al-azali that has always been in existence. It's the quality of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So don't forget that. It's not just being strong. Being strong is one thing, but having the reputation of strength is the other thing. Reputation meaning the propaganda, so and 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 so, in whatever, strong in whichever manner it might be. Strong in intellect, strong financially, strong physically, strong militarily, strong politically, strong socially, strong academic, whatever it might be. In whatever context one can refer to it in. So the one who has the power makes the rules. And the one whose propaganda machine, for use of a better word, is the strongest, can do that which they will. That's why the power of the media is so strong. وَإِذَا نُشُرُوا وَإِذَا الصُّحُفُ نُشِرَتْ وَإِذَا الصُّحُفُ نُشِرَتْ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions it at the end of times. The suhuf, the pages, they'll be spread. It's out. People being told. Everyone's out there being told, and that's what's going on. Whatever way we think it is, whatever.
Exposed.
Right? Everything's been exposed. It's being told. That's what happens at the end of time, as we said. When the unseen basically becomes seen, there's no more of these things. It just becomes open. The rocks start talking to the believers. Do this and don't do that. It's a sahih hadith as well, mind you. Okay? So, the people with authority, they're the ones who can physically stop people from doing things. And we live in a world, particularly in the the first world. Maybe we should. I don't like calling it the West. It's the first world where what happens is people want everyone to be like them. And I'm sure it happens in the second and third worlds as well. But we're not exposed as much to that world. So when someone comes up with something, everyone will say, no, do it this way. Wait a minute. The way that the first person suggested, maybe it's good for all and not good for some. Well, it's good for the majority and not good for some. Generally, when people come to critique the first idea, they come with a snippet of benefit to a minority of people. They don't come for the benefit of everybody. Like, for example, we've been hearing that what's been going on in Australia with the Muslims and what's been going on with the politicians and what they're saying and certain media personalities. And there's been a few responses. One of the responses that I liked was Walid Ali's response. Walid Ali's response is about forgiveness. And look, say that's the hashtag that he wants to use, but it's about empathy. It's about understanding from another person's point of view. So the critiques are out there. There's many, many critiques. And yet those critiques are specific. Like one critique said, oh look, yeah, why don't we go for justice? Yeah, we should go for justice. We shouldn't not go for justice. The question is, who has the capacity to do that? Who is in a position, out of the however many, I think I saw 4.5 million views of that video, right? Who's in a position out of those 4.5 million people to make a difference when it comes to justice? I don't know, but I don't think it's a very high percentage. I think 1% would be a large number. Unless it was talking about people being just in their own lives. That's a different thing, but that's not what the reference was to. Justice in the society, in the community which we live in. Another one was to have an alternate dialogue and call out the people that are doing the wrong thing and to call out the racist, so to speak, or the Islamophobic society. Okay, that's great. How many people of those 4.5 million have that capacity? I would say even less than the 1% that might have the capacity for justice. So when the original message comes out, when the original message is heard, of course it's not perfect. If it's not from Allah, there's always truth in things. But the question is that when the critiques come along, the critiques are personally based. They're based on the writers or the person prophesizing or professing or propagating that or propounding that thought, they're based on that individual's own worldview, rather than the worldview that is armed, that is general for the majority of people. Because we can all empathize. That's a human quality. Unless someone's sick, that might be 0.000000, very limited number of those 4.5 million people that watched it. Or unless someone's brain is washed, then that's a different story. But they have the capacity to empathize, but they choose not to empathize. And the point that I'm trying to push home with regards to this is that that's the prophetic message. That's the divine message. It's general. Of course there's exceptions to it. Of course there's multitudes of exceptions to it. But in essence, it's rahmah. Rahmah being described as mercy, but it's not just mercy, it's empathy. It's sympathy. It's that understanding we have for our fellow human being and the circumstance in which they're in. And it doesn't mean we stop there either. It doesn't mean that we stop there. Yet if we start from that point, if that's the starting point of our discourse, if that's the starting point of our rebuttals, if that's the starting point of our debates, then the way we do it is going to change dramatically. Dramatically. And they're not our teachers. Umar al-Mukhtar, he's the Asadullah, when they came to Tunis, Libya. When they came to Libya, the Italians, came and they invaded Libya, and the Italians were doing all sorts of colonialists, imperialists. They were doing all these sorts of, bombings and rapings and just disgusting things. And the followers of Umar al-Mukhtar, they said to him, "Why don't we do what they do?" He said, "They're not our teachers. We don't follow their way." And that's what I was alluding to earlier about the scholars that are saying they're confused. Are they confused because their knowledge is not beneficial? If that's the case, my advice is limit your exposure to these people. Are they ulama su'? Like, we don't want to have su' al-dhan, we don't want to have not given the benefit of the doubt, but that could be the reality. Then be careful. Be careful. The scholars are the followers of the inheritors, more correctly, of prophethood. Of prophethood. And there's one of the tafsir, one of the exegesis of the Qur'an, of the verse that we just read from Lu'ina Ladina Kafaru from Surah Al-Ma'idah, is when the Prophet of Allah died, when he went on to the next world, the ground, it complained to Allah, the earth complained to Allah, like, what? There's no more prophets anymore. What's going to happen? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's our job, the ummah of the Prophet of Allah, and in particular, the different aqtab and the different levels of awliya, they're the main ones. They're the ones who do the bidding of the. And then there's a hadith that said, the ulama of the Prophet of Allah, it's not a very strong hadith, but it's there. The ulama of the scholars of my ummah are like the prophets of Bani Israel, and there was a multitude of them. A multitude of them. So my point being, the one who inherits from prophethood will never be lost, inshaAllah Azza wa Jal. And the delineation, in other words, how you can tell which scholar is which scholar, is that fact. We do live in confusing times. Yes, no doubt about it. It's a fitna, it's the end of times, as has been said. But the scholars of Allah, the scholars of haqiqah, the scholars of reality, the scholars of truth, the inheritors of prophethood, do you expect the prophet to be confused? That's it. They're not confused. They may not comprehend the meaning of the Qur'an or the application. They may, because that's a thing about knowledge. It's a thing about knowledge. They may not comprehend the meaning of what's in the hadith because their knowledge may not be there to that level. But they're not lost. And they're not confused because their knowledge that they have is enough to guide them through the difficulty, through the different stages. So the authority that we're speaking about in this instance, the person who has the authority to change things physically with power should and must and is obliged to do so. So that's if the government is giving you the position of whatever police commissioner, or if you live in a Muslim government and they've given you the role to do whatever it is, parking officer, whatever role it is that you have in life, if you're tasked with that job, whatever is going on that's munkar, that's obscene, evil, whatever, then it's your job to change it. And that's also if you're the boss of a company. You own the company or the manager, whatever the case might be, and your employees are doing things that not proper. So what's the way to do that? What's the management style to change those things? policies. Come up with policies. And how do they do it? With mashwara. They have a meeting, they call everyone in, they say this is what's going on. Because when people own those things, those good ethical roles, then they tend to practice them. But when they're enforced upon them, then they tend not to practice them. They tend to reject them. Right? And if you're the head of your household, so that's if you're the father of the household, as an example, then you're the one who makes sure that whoever's doing something wrong, they're not waking up for Fajr, you wake them up for Fajr. If you're the mother, same thing. That's your responsibility. If in whatever circumstance it is, for example, a group of you are going somewhere and they've all decided that it's sunnah when there's more than 3 people together, or 3 or more people, to elect an Amir, someone who's responsible, who'll make the decisions. If you're the Amir and you make the decision, and they've elected you to do that, then you've got to make sure you do it. You've got to make sure you keep them away from, dissuade them from evil, and encourage them to good. Encourage them to good. Alright? And the second one, whoever doesn't have that capacity, then فَبِلِسَانِهِ, that person should use their tongue. And in essence, that belongs to the ulama. In essence, because that's their job, their tongues. Their job is to tell people, this is the ruling here, this is what should be done here, don't do this, be like that. So how can they be confused? How? Okay? Yeah. بَلِّغْ عَنِّي وَلَوْ آيَةً. The Prophet of Allah has got a hadith that says, even in one verse, so if you know something that you know has come from a reliable source, then you've got to enforce it in that manner by talking about it. And that with hikmah, with wisdom. You can't just blurt it out. Seeing non-Muslims say, oh, yeah, you're a Muslim now. If you don't say La ilaha illallah Rasulullah, you're going to go to Jahannam. You're going to go burn in the hellfire. That's not how you talk to them. You got to do it with hikmah, with wisdom. And again, what's the essence of it? What's the essence of the way we do da'wah? With rahmah. It's got to be with rahmah. If it's not with rahmah, it's going to be rejected. Alright? فَإِنْ لَمْ تَسْتَطِيعْ. If you can't do that, you don't have the capacity. Then what? فَبِقَلْبِكَ. The heart has to be connected to Allah. Ya Allah. Ya Allah, change these people. Ya Allah, this person is doing that. If that's not there, وَذَلِكَ أَضْعَفُ الْإِيمَانِ. And there's another riwayah, some of the scholars say, أَضْعَافُ الْإِيمَانِ. That is the exponential increase of Iman. Right? Because if that's not there, how are the other two going to be there? If one in one's heart, in one's soul, in one's essence, isn't committed to that, doesn't believe that that should be done, then how is it going to happen with regards to, with authority, by force, whatever it might be, putting people in jail, Bayt al-Ta'a, all these types of things, or with it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And if it does, it'll be ineffective. It won't have an effect. So, I was very happy today, mashallah, the reports I got from a lot of the mashaykh that are doing khutab, when you would expect them after what's gone on, in the last few days, and this turmoil that really Australia's in. We're not in turmoil. I said, look at the faces around me. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah, the Muslims, we understand what's going on. It's the others that don't understand. Those who are trying to perpetrate some sort of injustice towards the Muslims, they're the ones who, they're the ones who are confused. They're the ones who don't know what they're doing. No, it's all right. Leave it. Leave it.
Oh no, it's still.
Yeah, because what was the Khatib saying? I went to a place today that I normally wouldn't go, that I got stuck, and I was expecting, as they say, fire and brimstone khutbah, and I was very happy that it wasn't that. It was all about istiqama, istaqim kama umirt, be steadfast as you were ordered to. That we live in a time when holding on to one's faith is like holding on to a hot coal. Right? That we should keep, and this is the part I like the most, is to ادعو سبيل ربك بالحكمة. Call to the way of your Lord with wisdom. And what's going on in this country is a fatah for the believers. It's an opening for the believers. Why? Because people are starting to listen now. Now there's two sides to the story. There wasn't two sides, there was no story before. Or there was only one side to the story, we might say. And that was basically the government aspect of it, that was about terror laws. Now it's gone beyond that. Look, everyone wants to see terror laws. If we don't want to see terror laws, then there's something wrong with us. Because the people that are perpetuating these evils, when they don't consider you and I Muslim. If you don't subscribe to their particular strand of what they believe to be Islam is, they're not going to accept you, sorry. They're not going to accept you, and you're going to be a victim. They'll say the takfiri, they'll say, oh, this person's a kafir, their blood is halal, their possessions are permissible for us to take. So of course we want to see that. But now it's gone beyond that. So the narrative that was around, the narrative of security, we all agree with that. There's no conversation when it comes to that. Yeah, okay, there was some circumstances where the enforcement authorities went above and beyond. Okay, yeah. And that's got to be spoken about. That's got to be rectified as much as possible. But now the narrative isn't about terrorists. It's about Muslims. It's about Muslims now. The talk is, what are Muslims doing? Why should Muslims be here? Should Muslims, is even Islam a religion, etc., etc., etc. So now there's people thinking, wait a minute, that's got nothing to do with terrorism. Fair-minded people. They're thinking, well, what's going on here? And I know from the people I talk to, I know from the social media that I look at, before, when these extreme people, let's say there's about half a million of them. There's about 500,000 Muslims, and there's 500,000 of these people that are against Muslims. So alhamdulillah, it's even, which is alhamdulillah, that's a good thing. Okay? Don't worry about those 500,000. There's 22.5 million that are open book, that are a white page, that are seeking to understand, is this side right, or is that side right? Where does the truth lie? What should we do as a country, as a nation? What policies should we encourage our politicians to enact and to stand by? So it's a fatah for us. It's a chance to speak. And like I said, on social media, I used to see, when things were posted about Islam, those people from that 500,000 group just posting crazy stuff. Now, when those people from the 500,000 group post, people from the 22.5 million group, they're the ones refuting their arguments, not Muslims. Well, alhamdulillah. If that's not a fatah, I don't know what a fatah is. If that's not Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opening the door of da'wah. And don't worry about those 500,000. You come across them, what? Adaful iman. Ya Allah, Allahumma. And what did the Prophet say? Guess what the Prophet said? Allahumma ahdi qawmi innahum la ya'lamoon. Ya Allah, guide my people, for they know not. So that goes back to what? Empathy in our da'wah. Not there are this and there are that. No, habibi. Haram. Masakeen. Unfortunates. They don't know. Ya Allah, guide them. And of course you're not going to be able to talk to them because it's just, concrete or whatever. There's no aql salim that is just one way, brainwashed. That's fine. Know that that's the case, but that's only 500,000. Don't worry about those 500,000. Concentrate on the 22.5 million. Focus there. And subhanAllah, how it all came when Imam al-Haddad was telling us in this chapter about da'wah ila Allah. It's not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence. It's a fatah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for us and for the Muslims. And from what I can see, like I said, a lot of from the reports I got, I asked a lot of brothers about what was going on in the message, and that was the message that was being. That's a mature message. In my view, we haven't been that mature before. We haven't been that mature before, and that's if once that the voice becomes a voice in unison, Allah's going to listen to us, inshallah. Especially if we've got that intention, because what? Look at this. If we've got the intention to do da'wah, what does he say? وَقَالَ صَلَوَاتُ اللَّهِ وَسَلَامُهُ عَلَيْهِ وَالَّذِي نَفْسِي بِيَدِهِ لَتَأْمُرُنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَلَتَنْهُنَّ عَنْ مُنْكَرٍ أَوْ لَيُشَكَنَّ اللَّهَ أَنْ يَبْعَثَ عَلَيْكُمْ عِقَابًا مِنْهُ ثُمَّ تَدْعُونَهُ فَلَا يَسْتَجِيبَ لَكُمْ.
By the one in whose hands lies my soul, whom you will enjoin good and forbid evil, or God will soon send his punishment upon you, whereupon you will pray and not be answered.
Yeah, is that it? Right? So look, why can we say, inshallah, Allah's going to answer our prayer? Why can we say that? looking at that hadith, why can now the voice from the Muslims is that, what should we be doing?
Enjoying
Right.
good and evil.
So, if the Muslims are saying, and I don't mean me, I mean the Muslims, right, are saying, the learned people amongst the Muslims, those khutabat, those doing khutbah, if they're the ones saying, don't worry about all this stuff, let's do da'wah, let's call to Allah, let's invite enjoying good and forbid evil, what's the result of that going to be? It's in the hadith. We just read the hadith. Alright, what's it going to be? What's it going to be?
Our prayers will be answered.
Right, our prayers will be answered. Mahak wa Allah.
And we'll be saved from a punishment.
And we'll be saved from a grievous chastisement. So we're going in the right direction. Abshiru. Abshiru means like be positive, celebrate. Well, not quite celebrate, but be positive. Be positive. If we're doing the right things, Allah's divine help is there. The nusra of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is there. Like we said, because our iman is, we can walk on water, we can not be burnt by fire, like Sayyidina Ibrahim. All those different things that happened to all the prophets. That's our iman. We have no doubt about that. Whether it's going to happen physically or not is a different thing. But that's our iman. That if Allah decrees that to happen, water won't drown us. Okay? Rocks won't kill us. Animals won't attack us. Whatever the case might be. Poison won't kill us. Okay? That's our iman. Now we're doing the asbab al-imaniyya, al-isbab al-nabawiyya. And now if we use the prophetic asbab, the prophetic causes, first and foremost, al-maruf wa nahy al-munkar. And secondly, da'wah, or dua, excuse me. So the first one is da'wah, the second one is dua. Well, Allah's going to leave us? That's what Allah wants. If you're employed in a job, and they want you to sweep the floor, and you sweep the floor, they're going to kick you out? They're not going to kick you out. That's your job. So if we're doing our job, you reckon Allah's not going to do His job? You reckon Allah's not going to fulfill His promise? Of course He is. No doubt, because we have that iman in Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wallahu la yukhliful mi'ad. Allah does not break His promises. So we should be the most positive we've ever been. Right now. Right now. In and amongst, if we follow the prophetic methodology. If we follow that, and there's no doubt to inshallah azza wa jal. And next week inshallah we'll do the other hadith. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Any questions about any of that? And look, one thing that I did want to mention before you turn